All right, looks like I am live. I just realized I spent about an hour giving feedback before I realized that I forgot to hit record. So I'm just going to stream this, record it with mistakes and everything else, and go through again and leave feedback to those who still need to receive feedback. And I want to remind everyone that your ePortfolios are going to be due Wednesday. So I want to try to provide you this feedback again for those who have not received feedback from me so that you can try to make final changes to complete your ePortfolio by December 16th on next Wednesday. All right. So I guess I'll start again. I am using our Notion page to access your ePortfolios. So make sure that your links are up to date, that you're able to access, that you and I are able to access from our Notion page, your ePortfolios. All right, so let's dive into it. So Nicole here, it looks like you've just started with your ePortfolio. Try to go ahead and update and try to complete this. I would highly recommend that you look at some of the feedback that I'm providing some of your classmates so that you can get some ideas about how you can organize your artifacts, as well as kind of what I'm looking for as I give them feedback, see what might apply to your space here. Make sure, and this goes for everyone, that any images that you're using, I would not use any stock images that are coming from the templates that you are using. Make sure you're using images that are under a Creative Commons license or that are in the public domain. The images that are under a Creative Commons license, you're going to need to pay attribution. So you'll need to provide a link back to the source where you found the image. So make sure that you include that link in your ePortfolio anytime you're using images that fall under a Creative Commons license. If you are using images under public domain, again, it's not necessary to include or pay attribution. You don't need to include a link. You can use it however you want, any way you want. That's the most open type of license, those images that are in the public domain. All right, so moving on. Again, I'm going to go in reverse. Vanessa, this is I get a 404 page, so I get an error message. I'm not able to. Oh, okay, I see here. All right, I didn't do this. You might want to check the main link. But yeah, this is fine. The first time I did this, I just immediately thought I was not able to access your ePortfolio, but it looks like I can. So let's take a look. Now, the artifacts that I would include. All right, so maybe instead of listing Flipgrid, you list a specific video or videos that you uploaded in Flipgrid, title or label those types of videos, and you might even add a few lines of text in your space here to describe what it is we're looking at, to describe the type of artifact that you've included in this page. So when someone looks at your page at a glance, we get an idea about what it is we're looking at. If you are creating a reflection, an audio or video reflection, which I'm asking everyone to do, I would also label that as well. I would call it a reflection, and I would avoid any links, all right? And if you're including an audio or video, I would just upload it to YouTube, especially since you're using a Google Sites. Go ahead and upload the audio or video to YouTube, and then embed that video to your ePortfolio. Even if it's just an audio only, there's nothing visual going on, I think that will look better than having a URL like this. And we're not able to access this. This is not a public, probably not a public link. So someone would have to sign in to Microsoft, or Microsoft 365, presumably, to access this. So I would just use YouTube, especially since you're using Google Sites. That should be fairly easy to set up. I would avoid any access to your Google Drive. Again, upload things to YouTube for the most part. If these are documents, then go into Google Drive and publish it as a web page or share it publicly. There's actually a setting in Google Drive that allows documents to be shared publicly. So you'll have to do that first and then bring it into your Google Sites. If you have any questions about how to do that, just let me know. All right, same way here with writing, just double check so that all of the content can be accessible. And if you're going to be using Google Sites, it's very easy to set up a Google Doc and publish that publicly so that you can bring those into your ePortfolio. But you've got a good start. I like the navigational bar, very easy to use, good contrast. And I think, in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this link and update right now the link that I had. I had a slightly different page. All right. So, but it looks good. Vanessa, if you have any questions about my feedback, let me know. Moving on. Nidaleen, again, going through all of these for a second time. Yeah, you got to love technology. Spend an hour giving feedback before you realize, I didn't hit the record button. Here we go. I like the contrast, the simplicity. It's easy to read. And this is a good example of just choosing a very simple design that's very effective. It's very easy to navigate using your navigational bar here along the top of the screen. Now, what I mentioned earlier was that maybe instead of listing or including screenshots of some of the artifacts, try to include the actual artifacts. So your podcast, you have many episodes that you created throughout the semester. Just choose the ones that you are most proud of or that you want to share publicly and actually share the audio podcast in your ePortfolio so we can actually listen to the podcast. This is a mind map, so that's fine. If you want to include images that you created or mind maps that you created that you found useful that you want to reflect on, that's fine. But instead of using Flipgrid, and double check your spelling here, instead of labeling or listing Flipgrid, maybe instead you link a video that you created in Flipgrid and label that video, whatever type of video that you did, and then reflect on that in your space, your online space. In fact, all of us, we had some tongue twisters that we performed. If you want, for example, to share that video in Flipgrid that shows you reciting a tongue twister, then you can insert that video, that Flipgrid video, within your ePortfolio and then create separate reflection audios or videos that discuss that. Here you want to make sure that your videos and your audios are made public. And this, I mentioned this earlier, you probably want to upload it to YouTube, your audio or video, and then embed that within your site. That's how I would do your audio or videos. All right, but it looks good overall. I would just be a little bit more, provide a little bit more description in terms of the headings and maybe 1 or 2 sentence descriptions throughout your space to identify the different artifacts that you've included here, just to make it a little bit easier to see and to understand. And again, I wouldn't include any books. You want to include, exercises, things that you completed, that you created in class, but not so much images or books necessarily. Okay, these artifacts are things that you completed, that you created, or that you performed in your different classes that you want to share and reflect on. So I would try to keep that in mind. All right, so if you have any questions, if you have any other questions, Nadine, about my feedback, let me know. All right, let's move on. Monse. Okay, what I was talking about earlier, Monse, was you've got a good start here, a good homepage with good content. My comment mainly has to do with contrast. Notice that this message here gets a little bit lost. I mean, I can make it out, but there are times where it gets a little bit difficult to read. So if there's a way, for example, to move this text towards the center part of the screen, then maybe that would be a better option. Since you already have some white space down along the bottom of the screen, this might be something that you want to do. Now, when I looked at your page the first time, there were several minutes that went by before I realized that you had a navigational bar here. And again, I think that's because of the contrast. There's not a lot of contrast. Notice here that listening and speaking almost gets totally lost. And it's just the color choices here of the fonts versus the background that makes it easy to kind of overlook this. And so you really want these colors to pop. You want this to be really obvious the first moment that they visit a site or a user visits your ePortfolio, that you don't want them to not be able to find anything. And so if there's a way to change the color, I would try to do that. I think you're still working on your space, so some of the feedback that I've provided your classmates, I would also consider. You want to try to include audios and videos and documents and images that reflect activities, things that you created, that you performed, that you did as assignments in your different classes. These are your artifacts that you can include and label and describe and reflect on in each of your spaces. You've chosen here the different courses, right, to include, and that's fine. Notice that this contrast is really good, just to compare like the home page. Like, not so much here, but when you go into these other subpages, then there's really no problem, I see, with the color contrast. It's very easy to read and just to show a point of comparison. But make sure, again, that these artifacts are identified in your ePortfolio, that you have maybe a heading. It says here, my book report, maybe a line or two of text to further describe what it is we're looking at. I like this, though. I like how you have this information here down at the bottom. Okay, and if this is a reflection video, then maybe you label it as such. And yeah, but it's coming together, Monse. If you have any questions about my feedback, let me know. All right, so let's go on to Monica. I think, Monica, we've talked about yours. It's coming together really nicely. The navigational bar is very easy to read, very easy to navigate. I think I would capitalize S in speaking, just to be consistent there. My main comments that I made earlier today, number one, I don't know if this is just me, but the left side of the screen, a lot of the pages are getting cut off. And this happens in listening, speaking, and it happens in writing. I'm not sure about reading too. So that's one thing. The second is, you've got a lot of good content. Make sure that you have headings and text. You use headings and you use text to identify and kind of orient the user to what it is we're looking at. So maybe you label some of these, or you categorize or group them together so that instead of maybe looking like a collage of things, it's a little bit easier to identify, like, what's the difference between this artifact and this artifact. Or and although you have a public space here, and maybe share one or two of your favorite episodes directly, like you actually embed the episode. Since you created a public podcast, you can do that very easily, I think, in Anchor, where you can actually embed an individual episode or two, maybe a couple of your favorites, and bring it into your ePortfolio. I would highly recommend that you do that. Each of your episodes is an individual artifact, right? Every video and audio that you created with your teammates is a potential artifact. So imagine all of the different possible artifacts that you can include, and you don't have to include all of them, of course, but choose the ones that you want and actually share the actual audio and video. And again, maybe you're doing that in some of the cases. Like I'm looking here, you've got, well, it looks like here you have, yeah, I don't know if this is a reflection, but this is my point. Like maybe label these, and like this, to me, looks like a group discussion of some kind. Include the video, right? Make sure you have permission from your classmates. If they don't object, then I would encourage you to include those videos or audios within your ePortfolio. And you know, again, you've got a lot here. You might even pull back a little bit and just choose some of the most relevant, most meaningful experiences that you want to reflect on, and just share those in your ePortfolio. All right, author, I might title this About Me, just to personalize it just a little bit, so that we don't use the word author, which typically is just for writing. You're actually the content creator, which goes beyond just writing. So I think About Me is a typical title for this type of ePortfolio, where you've got a page dedicated to describing yourself. I think I would be consistent with the fonts. Notice that this font is different than this. So my feeling is, I don't know if you copied and pasted, sometimes the fonts change when that happens, but perhaps you want to use the same font there. But yeah, it looks really good, Monica. If you have any other questions or want to discuss your ePortfolio, just let me know. All right, moving on. Jacqueline. I think we talked about yours, Jackie. It's looking very good. You've got good navigational options here on the left-hand side of your screen. Good contrast overall. I think it's come together nicely. I like how you have headings, and you've got descriptions in text form. You've got the audio and videos here embedded very nicely. It's very easy to access. So yeah, this is very good. I think I would capitalize S in speaking. So listening and speaking, capitalize both of those. But yeah, it looks good. If you have any questions, Jackie, let me know. Maria de la Cruz. All right, so here, this is a similar comment that I made earlier. I would recommend that you only use images that are under what's called a Creative Commons license, or images that are in the public domain. And double check your spelling of the word purpose. And I think one of the things that I mentioned earlier was also the use of headings and description, using text to describe the artifacts that you're sharing. If you've got a reflective audio or video, maybe have a title called Reflection. In this case, if I click Culture, maybe you want to have a title called Culture, or even a specific title that relates to culture along the top, instead of having just ePortfolio. I think you do this in other pages, not in this one. We'll come back to listening and speaking here in a minute. I don't know if this is a mistake, a typo. You have grammar. Maybe you want grammar, Grammar. But notice that you have a heading here, grammar. Yeah, I think it's just a little bit redundant to have ePortfolio. I don't know if that's something you can change in your template, but let's take a look at reading. Yeah, so you've got headings here in some of your pages, but you're not consistent with all of the other pages. So yeah, and I mentioned this earlier, Flipgrid. Try to share the actual videos that you created in Flipgrid. Maybe you have a couple of videos that, in fact, I think you do that here. This is a tongue twister. So instead of labeling this Flipgrid, label it tongue twister. And maybe you have a line or two of text that describes the experience, or what you're doing in this particular video. And then label this audio a reflection. All right, a reflection. or an audio reflection. Right, so you want to try to label and identify each of your artifacts in text form. And again, you do that in some cases, like here, and you do it here, interview. That's great. And that's what I really like how you do that here. I would be consistent with that. So like you don't have any artifacts that are just not being identified. You want to identify every single artifact in some way, either through a text, a heading or title, or a line, maybe a line or two of text. All right, so I think you've got the idea. Just I would double check and try to be a little bit more consistent in how you identify each of the artifacts. Same way here. Try to identify a little bit more in like a heading or some text, and you've got some space to do that. And that's why I think we can fill up, you know, some of these spaces with text in order to help the user kind of navigate around your ePortfolio. But a very good start. Yeah, Maria, if you have any other questions about my feedback, let me know. All right, Liz, looking at your ePortfolio. All right, very good. Now, I spent some time talking about your ePortfolio. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it recorded, but hopefully this is recording now. This is, and sometimes the way these templates are designed, it's very much of an individual preference kind of thing. And so I'm going to tell you how I feel about how I navigate around this. And it doesn't mean that you have to change it. If this is what you want and this makes sense to you, and this is how you want others to access your content, that's perfectly fine. But when I go in, first of all, the home page, the About Me, My Abilities, Educational Experience, and Contact, okay, when I access these links from the home page, it's all on one page, right? Just to make that observation. Now, what's interesting about this template is when I go under My Abilities, and in this case, there are three options: grammar, listening, and listening, speaking, and reading grammar. The thing I noticed is, first of all, I would suggest that instead of saber más, I would change it to English. Maybe have it say click here, or yeah, click here. And because at first I'm like clicking here, and then I'm clicking here, and like nothing, and like, okay, what do I do? Until I realized, oh, I gotta click here. Now, when I click here, notice now it takes me to another page. This is actually a sub page. It's a different page than, okay, let me back up. If I click My Abilities, so notice the breadcrumb here. I'm in grammar and writing, right, that I accessed. Now I'm going to go back to My Abilities. Now, when I click on My Abilities here, I'm thinking I'm going to go back to where I just left. I think I'm going to go back to this, but I don't. Actually go back to a sub page. This is a totally different page. And so, again, I can go back to saber más, okay, and that's fine. And it's just, it threw me a little bit. It was a little bit confusing. And again, this is just my brain trying to access your content. And this doesn't mean that you have to change it, but I'm sharing my experience as a user navigating your space, right? So that you get that feedback. Because at the end of the day, you want the experience to be easy for anyone to access, to be able to find your information. You don't want people to get lost. And I'm not saying I got lost, but it was just a weird thing, right? Now, the other thing I mentioned was that My Abilities, I want you to think long term. And for right now, what you have here is perfectly acceptable. And for this class, this semester, there's no problem. But I'm thinking long term, and I hope that you're also thinking in long term in terms of some of the decisions that you're making in how you organize your content. When you get into the BA program, you're going to take classes in applied linguistics, teaching methodology, practicum, and English proficiency or English skill development. So right now, this first year in Prope, we're primarily focusing on English skill development. So all of the courses primarily fall under that category for the most part. And again, that's why this is fine with what you have here. But if you start to get into other classes starting next year and you're wanting to add artifacts to the space, then you might want to change the title of the heading of this. So basically how you have it set up is you would click this bar and I would give it another title. And I was even trying to come up with a better title, and I was having some problems doing so. Trying to come up with one word, a very short description that would apply to your knowledge, your skills, your ethics, thinking in terms of all of the types of classes you're going to take. But in this case, you would have some heading here, and then under here, maybe 4 categories. One category for skill development, another one for applied linguistics, another one for teaching methodology, and a 4th for practicum. And then when you hit click there, then you would go under even additional subpages that relate to those types of, that area, those types of classes. All right, so I'm just putting it out there for you to think about it and consider that, because again, these decisions that you're making right now, it's hard to kind of see in the future about what kind of artifacts you could be including. But I really wanted to spend time with you guys this first semester in giving you an overview of what to expect. With the types of classes that you're going to be taking later on are going to fall under different types of categories. And those categories, I think, logically make sense in terms of putting together a professional ePortfolio for a teacher, for a future teacher, for even a current teacher. And this ePortfolio is not just an academic exercise. This is a space that I hope you guys continue to promote and develop as you gain more experience and you're working in the field. You're an in-service teacher, practitioner. You're in the field working, and as you are gaining knowledge, as you gain skills, you bring those achievements into your ePortfolio so that you have something to complement your resume. Remember that the ePortfolio is designed to help complement your resume when you're looking for that job. And I would dare say that those who are looking for competent teachers are going to get more out of the ePortfolio, right? If it's designed well and informative and reflective, that's going to do a lot more and go a longer way than simply just having a resume. One thing we also haven't talked about with regard to the ePortfolio is also as it relates to opportunities to study abroad. And so this ePortfolio also, I think, will help in that regard as well. If you want to be involved in an exchange program, that having an ePortfolio, I think, will also be advantageous. So I hope I've talked you into thinking about how you want to organize this, thinking in terms of maybe how you want to think about organizing other types of content that are going to come later on. All right, but good start, Liz. If you have any questions about my feedback, let me know. All right, Leo, I really like your ePortfolio. I like the way that you've got the navigational bar here along the top. Same rules apply. These categories are perfectly fine for right now, but you might later decide to change that as you get into the BA and you have other types or classifications or categories of classes that you're going to be taking, that it might make more sense to make some changes to this navigational bar and actually have these current headings as subpages. But for now, this is fine. I like the color scheme. I like how you have labeled a lot of the artifacts going into listening and speaking. You have labeled them and you have a description. Now, what I will say here, one change I would consider. In this case, we have Flipgrid. I would suggest that you go in and choose some of your favorite videos that you uploaded to Flipgrid and bring those into your ePortfolio. That is, link it or embed them so that we can actually see the videos. And instead of a label called Flipgrid, you have a label that reflects the type of video that you uploaded in Flipgrid, if that makes sense. And then here, this description would be very much related to the type of video that you're describing. So it's not a general description of Flipgrid. It's more, okay, what did you create in Flipgrid? Or what do you want to reflect about in creating that video in Flipgrid? Right? So any of the artifacts that you're sharing, you can also think of not only it as an end product, but also the process of creating that end product. That's what you can reflect on. And I'm kind of skipping ahead, but the reflection that you have here, that's what you can talk about, is not only the end product, but also the process in developing that. Now here you kind of do that where you have a round table, but why not include the link or the actual video of your round table discussion? And you bring that video into your ePortfolio. The TOEFL review I talked about earlier, if you want to include that, this is not in this ePortfolio. Don't think that you have to include every possible thing that we did. I want you to include the highlights of what you did this semester, the highlights, the things that had the biggest impact on you. Now, of course, if this was very meaningful in terms of helping you with listening, or that's fine, right? But try to include only those artifacts that you feel had the biggest significance in terms of what you learned, how you learned the content. Speaking activity, again, maybe think about the actual, label. What kind of speaking activity did you participate in, and include the audio or video of that speaking activity, and maybe a brief description of that experience here in text form, as well as talking about it in your reflection. So I hope you get the idea. Again, I like how you've organized. You've got good use of imagery. Make sure that all of the images are under the Creative Commons license. Make sure you're not using any stock images or images that were included in the template. Make sure that you're using Creative Commons. Remember the Creative Commons search option, where you can actually find images that you can bring in and upload to your ePortfolio, as long as you pay attribution. You always need to make sure that to include the link back to the image where you found the image, and make sure that that link is visible very close, right next to the image. Like the book report, include the book report, okay, or an image of the book report to give us some kind of visual. Instead of maybe the image here, this image, maybe show the book report. All right, so again, overall good. I really like how you're putting together your ideas and your content for your ePortfolio layout. If you have any questions about any of my comments that I made today, let me know. All right, moving on. Jesus. All right, so Jesus, in your case, the main comments I had, and you've got a really good start, but most of it has to do with aesthetics in the sense that there are times where the text kind of blends over or it gets lost. Like in this case with listening and speaking, it gets lost as it goes over the video. So maybe there's a way to move the video off to the right, perhaps. Maybe bring in some text description below. I noticed that here you have a description. I will show my skills and how I develop it, or how I develop them if you're referring to skills. But when I click on English skills, I also get more description. I will show you my skills. Now, if this is more specific to your skills, I'm just comparing this. Like, is it different than this? Or can you combine this perhaps? Are you being repetitive or not? Yeah, I don't know. These are just questions that come to mind. And, you know, again, I'm looking at this menu. I don't know if there's a way that this menu can be brought or pop up like directly underneath, because sometimes it blends, it kind of bleeds over. So notice how this is kind of distracting. And I don't know if this image, there's like no border along the top. So it gets kind of, it runs in, this image kind of runs into the text along the top. So it's really just a matter of making some decisions about organizing your content, organizing what you already have, so that, again, it's easy to read. Try to avoid using too many different types of fonts. Like notice here, like this font's different than this. This font's different. Appears to be different than this. Not sure. But you want to try to label the artifacts. So instead of calling them artifacts, just label what they are. If it's a debate, call it a debate, all right? Label it a debate. Maybe you have a sentence or two that describes something about either the creation or the experience of performing the debate. If you're looking at a book report, you're showing the book report like an image, and then you've got it labeled, and you've got a short description in text form in addition to your audio reflection. All of your audio reflection should also be labeled as such, right? So you want to have maybe text that says reflection, or a reflection, a reading reflection, or listening, speaking reflection. And it's just a matter of sometimes simplifying the types of fonts that you're using, labeling them very well, and include the artifacts themselves, right? You want to include, in this case, is this reading? See, and maybe you have a heading at the top, so that, like right now, I forgot what we're looking at. Now I'm looking at the URL. It says reading, but notice there's no, well, okay, it says reading artifact here, the crown. But what is the artifact? Did you create this? Did you create this? Is this the crown? Is this something that, you know, think of the artifacts as something that you did, or that you created, that you performed. Now, maybe you read a story called The Crown, but what did you do with that? Did you underline certain text to show certain strategies? Maybe you list them as strategies, reading strategies. That maybe that's even the title of the artifact. And you have an image where you show different aspects of something that you did that relate to that particular strategy, if that makes sense. That's the idea. These artifacts are things that you created, that you performed or did in your classes. So it looks like you're still working on your ePortfolio. I hope this helps. Just let me know, Jesus, if you have any questions about any of the feedback that I'm sharing with you here today. All right, moving on. Jackie. Mirna. Okay, so Mirna, I like your homepage here. Now I noticed that this pops up, and if this is what you want, something that pops up every time somebody visits, fine. If not, I would remove that. Sometimes this becomes a distraction. Like if you want somebody to contact you, maybe you have an About Me page. Maybe you have a link up here at the top in your navigational bar that takes someone to your subpage that includes the form where others can contact you. I think it's a good idea to include a contact form so that you're not sharing your email, your phone number, your address, but it still allows others to contact you if you want them to do that. But it's very common to have an About Me page where you have that form where others can reach out to you. I like your navigational bar. Very easy to read. Now, maybe here, instead of artifacts, click to see those of LNS. Maybe you just have here listening and speaking, because when I click on that, that's in fact where it takes me. Here, I like the use of headings. Maybe you can use some text to further describe what it is we're looking at. Instead of labeling it Flipgrid, choose a few videos from Flipgrid to include in your ePortfolio. So Flipgrid is not an artifact. An artifact is actually a video that you created in Flipgrid. Podcasts, like this is not an artifact. An artifact is actually an episode. So let's say China, episode number 5 or week 5, your third episode, maybe that's one that you particularly like that you want to share with the public, then share that one individual audio, that episode, in your ePortfolio, and then reflect on it by labeling your audio reflections, right? Create a heading that says reflection or a podcast episode reflection, and label it there in your page. All right, so that's what I would suggest in trying to make it really clear those specific artifacts as individual audios and videos and documents, PDFs, images, right? These are all examples of things that you created, those experiences that you actually performed that you want to share with the public. Now, one thing I noticed here, and this is, I don't know if this is, if you can control this, if you can design a way to avoid the user from having to click the back button. So notice when I go into culture, I lose the navigational bar. And the only way that I can go back, well, I guess I can click on ePortfolio. I can do that. But I either have to click ePortfolio to go to the home page, or I have to click back. So usually the navigational menu will be consistent throughout all of the pages, or at least most of the pages, so that we can jump to, I can go from writing, like if I want to go to writing and I want to go straight to grammar, I have to go back to the home page and then click grammar. It would be nice to have that navigational bar and allow me or the user to be able to go directly to different pages throughout your ePortfolio. But again, try to use more labels, description, like text throughout to identify the different types of artifacts. Notice that a list of verbs is not an artifact that you created, right? These artifacts, I want these to be things that you created, unless you created this, right? But if you just got the list from a page online or from a book, unless there's some notations or something, like if you have a book that you actually did an activity in and you marked it up, you wrote on it, you made notes, then perhaps you can include that. But the artifacts for this ePortfolio, I want you to think more in terms of things that you created. Things that you created, things that you did. And our class is kind of easy, I think, because we have so many artifacts, all the audios and videos and group meetings that you had with your classmates, all of those are potential artifacts. In grammar, if you, any activities that you did are potential artifacts. In writing, any paragraphs that you wrote, that you developed, those are potential artifacts. Go to writing, right? So if you wrote a paragraph, that could be a potential artifact. And maybe there's some annotations, maybe it's even feedback from your instructor. Maybe it's your own feedback. Maybe you self-assess your own work and you write up and find mistakes, and you can talk about those mistakes and what you learned in your writing class, in your reflection as part of your ePortfolio. All right, so I hope this helps. Mirna, if you have any other questions about what I'm explaining here in terms of your ePortfolio, let me know. But you've got a really good start here. I like what you've done with the template. But do experiment a little bit to see, what you can do to see if there's a way to make it a little bit easier to navigate around from page to page. All right, moving on. Erica. Again, feel like I've got deja vu here, giving everyone feedback here for the second time. All right. Erica, I like your page. I like how you've got a greeting, the purpose of your ePortfolio, a good reflection here. For now, this is fine in terms of the navigational bar, you're going to probably decide later if you keep this up, if you decide to continue to contribute to your ePortfolio when you get into the BA, to maybe change some of these categories to include applied linguistics, teaching methodology, practicum, and skill development. But for now, this is fine. I would capitalize speaking, so capitalize listening and speaking. Let's go into listening, speaking. So what I would try to do is any audio reflections, I would avoid the URL and probably upload the audio to YouTube. Even though it's for video, you can upload audio and then embed that into your space here. That's what I would do, because this audio, no one's going to be able to hear the audio, okay, since it's part of SharePoint, it's part of Microsoft. So you want to try to create a public audio or video, and I think YouTube is probably the easiest way to do that. I would use more labels and descriptions, as I mentioned in other ePortfolios. Try to include a line or two of text to complement and describe what it is we're looking at. I mean, you've got a title here, but maybe a line or two of text to complement that. Now, the podcast, I mentioned this earlier as well. Try to choose some examples. Maybe you choose 2 or 3 of your favorite podcast episodes that you want to share, that you want to reflect on, and you can include subheadings or titles that reflect the topic of your episode, right? If you've got an episode, I'm trying to see the ones, Phil Collins, right? So if you're talking about Phil Collins, then that would be a label, a Phil Collins episode, right? And or Phil Collins life, or whatever it is you discussed in that episode that you're particularly proud of, that you want to share. These headings are more reflective of the type of artifact that you created, right? And this is a good example where you're actually taking the subject matter of the episode of your podcast and creating a heading or a sentence or 2 description that you're including in your online space, and then a reflective video about that particular video, not about all of the podcast, not about maintaining a podcast for the entire semester necessarily, but it's more specific about what you're talking about in that episode or episodes. So again, a little bit more text, I think, would be helpful, just so at a glance we can kind of get a feel for what kind of artifacts it is you're including. And let's say the reading. Okay, you got a book report. So again, maybe a little bit more description in the text, and maybe show an image of the book report. Maybe you have some sort of image or file that shows the actual book report, and then a reflective video about that particular artifact. All right, so consider that, Erica. If you have any other questions about your ePortfolio, just let me know. Okay, I think I've left everyone else feedback. I will go ahead and stop for now. If I missed anyone, certainly let me know. Or if anyone needs further clarification, I'm going to try to provide this feedback to everyone today, December 12th, to give you guys a chance to make any final changes to your ePortfolio for Wednesday, December 16th. Again, if anyone has questions, or if anyone wants even to meet online and just to discuss your ePortfolio, we can do that as well. Just send me a chat message in Microsoft Teams, and we can do that. But try to finish up for the 16th, and look forward to seeing your final versions of your ePortfolio, guys.